So welcome everybody today to our webinar, which today is focusing on children and young people that are affected by parental young onset dementia. I'm really pleased to be joined here by Hannah and Patricia, and welcome everybody. As attendees, you will not be on audio or video today, so please do communicate with us through the chat function. We'd love for you to introduce yourselves. And any questions you may have for Hannah and Patricia, please put them into the Q&A box and we will save some time at the end of the webinar to get to those questions. To start our webinar today, we are going to play a video of a recording of an interview that Hannah and Patricia did with Bethan, who cared for her mum who had young onset dementia. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to play that video for you now. And okay, so I'll play that video for you now.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today. We've got Beth who's agreed to share her lived experience, which is really vital to help us understand the impact of what it's like to be a young carer for a family member with young onset dementia. So hello Beth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, well obviously I'm Bethan, and I was a carer when I was 18. I became a carer when I was 18 for my mum who had young onset dementia. She was diagnosed at 55, and my caring role lasted from 2015 to 2022.
So very young, caring for your mum,
Yeah.
and the main carer as well for your mum too. And what support did you have, if any at all?
I had quite a lot of support, not all of it good, but I had quite a lot of support from young onset dementia groups specific. We created a WhatsApp group, so my peers who were in the same situation, fantastic. It was so knowledgeable. Everyone's so knowledgeable. Adult social services were involved to offer support and signpost to different places, different people who could help. Independent volunteer groups, so in our area, people that come and take you out, do all the different things, different care groups, art groups, all that sort of thing, and eventually home care, so where they come to do personal care and, you know, cooking, cleaning, whatever you need for you.
Yeah, so lots of different organisations coming together. And what did you find was the challenges of having these organisations, or any gaps of support that you feel that you could have really benefited from?
Well, some of the challenges and hurdles of it was my age, definitely. Most of the time I felt I wasn't heard properly. So because I was so young, people just thought, you know, well, she doesn't know what she's talking about, you know, this, that and the other. I wasn't really involved in decision makings from social services point of view and coming up with a care plan and the rest of the stuff that was involved. Even though I'm the one that knows my mum the best, I'm there 24/7, and I just felt like it wasn't taken into consideration when preparing the plans and coming up with different support that was needed, that I wasn't involved in it at all.
So you felt like they didn't really see you because of your age and not really understand the caring responsibilities that you were providing mum, and how vital your support was as well, how you were keeping mum at home with all those services as well. So the communication that you had to engage with the different organisations at such a young age, and I know adults would find that difficult, and with being a child, even harder as well. So looking back, what would have really helped you if you could reflect back?
Finding someone that can advocate for me, I think, would be one of the most important things. Sort of a go-to person that could, that knows everything, you know, that's so knowledgeable that it's coming out of their ears. Someone that's able to say, well, this is your problem, here's how we fix it. This is the support that we've got, how can we help? And that's the most important thing, that, you know, over the 7 years that I was caring, the most important thing someone could say was, how can I help? And then plan the solution after that. It was, you know, it was like a Hail Mary and a hallelujah. It's someone's actually listening.
They're vital words, isn't it? Can I help? Isn't it just to be seen and heard, isn't it, that what you were doing and that support? And often children do feel that isolation as well. So your key message to really help people understand and help us change support and increase support for children
is probably listen. It's whether they're a main carer, a family member, you know, a friend, whoever it is, it's listen to what they need and how they can support that person with dementia. Because ideally you want them to be in that position for as long as possible, so no one has to step in for both parties. So listen to how you can support them.
Power of listening, isn't it?
It definitely would have been beneficial to have somewhere to just drop in as and when was needed. So if it was Thursday at 10 o'clock every week or every other week, that I didn't have to do it every week. And yeah, it'd be beneficial to have somewhere to rant, to ask for support, ask for help from people my age, even if it was nothing to do with dementia. It was just people my age that we could talk football, sports, you know, anything that was my fancy at that point. I had somewhere to go where I could talk to people that were my age, were in my situation, that understood.
Oh,
yeah,
thanks.
good. Yeah, definitely makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Mm.
And
Well, I think
always makes me sort of chuckle, because the support isn't standard across the UK. The difference from county to county is astonishing. I live right on the border of 2 counties, and you know, someone 3-4 streets down from me gets completely different support than what I would have got. And it was beneficial in some ways, and it wasn't for them. I could access support that they desperately needed, and they couldn't because they were in a different county.
yeah, I have heard that many times. Yeah, and it's that's why maybe things online sometimes.
Yeah.
Although sometimes even things online you're not able to access them because you're not referred to them because you're not in the right place.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and being so honest as well to help us really understand the impact on children and young people living within families facing young onset. So thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome.
Well, thank you to Bethan there for sharing that. It's really, really important that we hear from people like Bethan to explain what she went through and what she needed to support her and her mum when they were going through that. So I'm going to hand over now to Hannah and Patricia, who are going to share their presentation, and I'll let you introduce yourselves. Thank you.
I'm just going to share, Hannah. Can you see it?
I can see it, not on. Oh, yeah, perfect.
There we go.
Excellent. Oh, hello everyone. It's so lovely to be here today to talk about children and young people living within families facing dementia. My name's Hannah Gardner. I'm consultant level nurse for children and young people at Dementia UK, and it's lovely to be joined by Patricia as well to really work together to raise awareness of the impact that dementia has on the whole family, but particularly children and young people living in families facing young onset dementia. So it's great to be here to talk about the subject. Next slide. And today, so what we're going to focus on, firstly, going to look at who are young dementia carers and what do they actually need, which is really important about how we actually identify these young people living within families that are carrying caring responsibilities for a parent with young onset. And then we're going to talk about my role, so consultant adult nurse for children and young people. And then we're going to talk about developing resources. So Patrick's going to talk about her eye support for young people. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how we're actually working together to improve and support for children and young people living with young onset dementia. So I'm going to hand over to Patrick now for the next slide.
Hello, everybody. It is really great to be here, as Hannah was saying. So it's really, really nice to share all this information with you. So we're going to start by very briefly, obviously, thinking about who are young dementia carers. And in very simple terms, there are children and young people who help care for a family member living with dementia. This is a very broad definition because every family is different and every child will be different. We know from the evidence that they very rarely receive appropriate training and support, but also that worryingly the visibility and their identification is very, very low. In general, young carers are difficult to identify, but I think in the case of young dementia carers, these young people are really, really even harder to identify. My work in this topic started a number of years ago. I worked with young adult carers that were caring for a parent with dementia. And I just wanted to show you this work that one of my participants did. And this is a way for her to explain what her life was when she was caring for her mom with dementia. So she explained it as a balancing act. Everything was balancing. The two little pink columns at the bottom were her and her mom. The big ladder to access support, and everything else is a very, very balancing, very, very dangerously balancing act. So it kept breaking as she was making it, and she was saying, well, you see, this is what my life is. Things can be okay one day, and then everything falls apart the next day. So we've also done work with families and with professionals, so they could to give them the chance to tell us what is it that they need. You have the QR code there for the full paper, but I'm going to give you a little snippet of what families and professionals told us. So one of the things that that we were told many times during the work we did, talking to these professionals and family members, was that you need tailored support that is fit for purpose, and that fit for purpose is the important bit. As a parent for one young person said to us, she said, I've never found that right place for them. What they were offered were things like trips out, and although they love all that sort of thing, my girls didn't particularly need that. They needed someone to talk to. So that's something that was repeated quite a lot in the work, in listening to these families. Another thing that came out very, very strongly was the power of peer support, how parents and young adult carers and carers themselves valued peer support. One mom said to us, our children felt unusual, isolated and alone. So being with other people who are in a similar situation was really, really powerful. And one young man that is and was a carer for his mom when he was 17, he said to us, in that group, there's a universal understanding, so you don't have to do the explaining part, which is often the very, very difficult initial part. If you go to this QR code, you can access a YouTube video where we kind of put together in nice, easy to understand language, what is it that these families and young people told us that young dementia carers need. So they need society to understand, they need clear ways to be identified, they need the support to be for the whole family, but they also need awareness campaigns that resonate with them, that have that show that dementia is not only affects older people, that it affects younger people as well. And also, yeah, that as we were saying, that they need tailored support that is fit for purpose and addresses the needs that they have. So I'll pass on to Hannah, that is going to explain a little bit about her role.
Yes, so yeah, my role is the consultant adult nurse for children and young people. It's a new role. Dementia UK recognise that dementia doesn't just affect the person living with dementia, it affects the whole family. So if you could go on to the next slide, Patrick. So yes, so the service was launched in June of this year, and it's a national role, and it's about raising awareness and recognising children are impacted by dementia within the family as well. So this role is dedicated to all under 18-year-olds living within families facing dementia. And a big part of this role, we recognise the complexities and the difficulties and the lack of support that's there for children living within young onset families. So Admiral nurses are qualified nurses, and our role is about supporting the families, and we recognise dementia ripples through the whole intergenerational aspect of a family. Next slide. So why was it introduced? So there's no service just for children or young people nationally or internationally. Dementia UK recognise there's research out that identifies the needs and the support for children. So this role is an opportunity to actually raise awareness. It's a platform that we can use within Dementia UK on a national and international level to recognise children living within families facing dementia. We want to combat the loneliness and isolation that children feel within their local communities, within their schools. We want to increase knowledge and understanding of children's understanding and comprehension of dementia, but we also want to increase knowledge and understanding of schools, social care, to recognise the complexities that children within young onset families particularly face. And it's that national awareness of raising and recognition of children and looking at resources as well. We know children don't want to pick up a leaflet. We're looking at ways that we can produce resources to help children, to help others understand and support children going forward. I think the most important aspect of this role, young people are driving the service. We recognise that if you're going to have a service for children and young people, you've got to have young carer voices behind it to actually recognise what it's like to be a child growing up in today's world when a loved one has dementia, particularly young onset, and it's a parent. Next slide. So my role, I'm a registered nurse, so I am registered with the Nursing and Midwifery Council as a registered nurse. I had to revalidate every 3 years in evidence that I'm working at a level that's clinical. Consultant Admiral nurses are advanced practice, so within my role, it's about clinical, it's about leadership, it's about education and research are big aspects of my role. So 25% of my time is dedicated to clinical work. So Dementia UK Admiral nurses to identify children that might need support. And with the clinical support that we give, it's about resetting those aims. So we want to improve their understanding and knowledge about dementia. We want to create that safe place where a child can ask a question and have that trusted adult that can answer it with correct resource, with research interventions that actually work, and also recognise the emotional impact and the importance of listening, of actually listening to children in a non-judgmental way to enable them to feel like they can cope better. So part of the role is clinical, but just a small part of it. And by working with the children, it actually helps to gain a real understanding of what it's like in the community, in the local communities, to be a child living within families facing young onset dementia. And sometimes just some children want to use the service, some children don't, but just knowing that there is a service for them if they need it can really make a big difference to children. Next slide. So the role has leadership, so it's a national role. It's about being an ambassador for children and young people, for all children, and particularly young onset children, to help them feel like they've got their voice and actually to raise awareness and driving improvement between our Admiral nurses. So across the UK, we have over 450 Admiral nurses that support families in hospitals and communities. So it's about providing support and training for them. So we are doing a webinar next year with Lorenzo House and Patrick to actually upskill Admiral nurses to recognise children within families facing young onset. And we recognise those gaps of support as well. And also with Dementia UK, we do have our policy and campaigns team. So it's actually at that parliamentary level as well, recognising that young carers, but also young dementia carers need support. So it's working with our policy and campaigns team as well to actually raise it from a higher profile to actually make the government recognise young carers, but also recognise young dementia carers that need support too. Next slide. So what I've noticed, some of the support of this role within young onset families, quite lots of common needs identified, which actually reflect a lot of Patri's research and other research that's out there as well. So we find that children within young onset families find it hard to accept We recognise the emotional impact when society thinks dementia is an older person's condition, and people around you may not realise the impact it's having on you, because we know young onset is often not memory led, so that brings it complexities and emotional impact and acceptance of a diagnosis. We understand children find it hard to understand these symptoms and what's happening to the parent, because we often can't see dementia, we see the symptoms. So it's about how do you understand, explain to a child what is happening to a parent, and enable them to feel like they can cope and understand better. We find that children find it very difficult to share the impact. We recognise sometimes children find it actually very hard just to put into words what they're going through, to talk to their peers, to access support, to actually let people know how they're feeling, and if they aren't coping, how to access support within the school, the pastoral support. We find children find it difficult maintaining the relationships with the person with dementia. We understand it impacts their own future, their own education. Sometimes they can't see that far ahead because they're in that survival mode of living within a parent with dementia and just feeling overwhelmed. And that can bring the isolation and impact education and their social life as well, if they feel very different to their peers because of what they're going through. We recognise that young onset children recognise it's difficult when a loved one goes into hospital, goes into a care home, and those environments aren't always set up for families with children as well. We recognise that loss and grief that children feel. Some children feel grief for the relationship they never had. They feel grief for the family dynamics is changing. So the big grief and loss that often children don't recognise that they're grieving, and often schools and parents don't realise they're grieving as well. We recognise children recognise and want to support other family members. They're worried about the well parent, they're worried about siblings, they're worried about grandparents as well within young onset families, how that can have impact on them too. And we also recognise the transition into legal adulthood. We recognise the complexities of consent, and actually from 16 to 18, the actual legal aspect of becoming an adult when you've been a carer as well. So there's huge common needs identified within families facing young onset dementia. Next slide. And so what we find as the challenges, so this role has its challenges. We know that this group of children and young people within young onset families are hidden and hard to reach. We recognise that how do we categorise these children so they recognise themselves as carers or impacted by dementia and then able to access support. What words do children like to be called? I know the word carer can be quite difficult for anyone, and even adults don't recognise themselves as carers. So it's our terminology that we use to address these children. It's new to Dementia UK, so it's a new area of supporting children. So that has been its challenge of looking across the whole charity of how we support children as well. And with my role, we've had to change our data protection, our policy and privacy notices on our website. We have a child-friendly privacy notice now as well, because we're actually holding children's data, and that has brought very different to adult data protection. And also when you're supporting the children, it's been virtually, but we recognise the lack of resources and research for these children, and that lack of local support that just isn't there, and it's really hard to support virtually when you know there's nothing in the community, nothing you can signpost to, nothing that you can get that support. We recognise safeguarding, so my role sits within Dementia UK Safeguarding Committee, so we have monthly meetings, so I'm part of the Safeguarding Committee at Dementia UK as a representation for children. We recognise the age range as well, and we recognise the complexities of young onset that can bring to families, and consent as well, how you get consent from looking at the GILIP testing as well, and then also getting parental consent. So it has all brought lots of challenges, but we've been able to work through them, and an ongoing development for the charity as well. Next slide. So this role is very much about research opportunities. So it's great to work with Patri and looking at research. You can't do this role without the research, because we need that interventions that are research-based, evidence-based, that work. Part of the role is working with Dementia UK research and publications team. It's about writing journals and articles in nursing magazines, publications, just within the nursing and other health professionals as well. And as the service develops, we're also collecting data So everything that I do is collecting that data, which is really valuable to evidence that there is a need for this support and growth as well, to share at that parliamentary level. Look at, this is what's happening to children with young onset. We need more support. So that all helps to actually raise the profile of support. Next slide. So my personal reflections. So I wear two hats. My own mum had young onset Alzheimer's. So my mum developed Alzheimer's when she is in her early 50s. So I come with that lived experience. But when I'm with this role, I still see those needs. I see it in the children's faces, the support that they need. So far, so in the first 8 months of the service, we've supported over 30 people, and mostly of those have been young onset families. I work with Jules Knight, the consultant Admiral nurse with young onset dementia. We recognise those pathways overlap with our services. And I suppose I recognise the complexity. Every case has been complex. It's been different environment. Everyone is different. Every family is different. Identify the maturity of the children. Some of the questions that children come to want the answers. Intrigued about, how can I help? Is my parent going to die? Is it going to happen to me? They really want those answers, and to be that trusted adult is really important to ensure that you're given the right age appropriate information. We recognise the risks within children about the support for now and future. Reflection that the children want to support the well parent. We identify the power of listening is so important for these children to actually feel heard and validated for what they're going through. We recognise education gaps. We recognise that children don't want pity, they want empathy for what they're going through. And they really want their voices behind resources, research and education to actually help people recognise what they're going through. And it just, on the reflection, there's such a big opportunity in this role to really support those children living within young onset dementia. So I'm really pleased to share an update on the role, and it's an ongoing development, but it's so nice to start raising that awareness in Dementia UK across all our services as well. I'm just going to hand it back to Patrick.
Thank you, Hannah. So on this, following from Hannah and realizing that there's very little support out there, in 2021-22, we started working with young people to develop, I think it's the first resource that is tailored to young people that help care for a family member with dementia, and it's called iSupport for Young People. So it's free, it's an online training program, but it can also be downloaded as a PDF, so anybody can access it in this link or QR code, absolutely free. And it's the first little step, in our opinion, to start thinking, okay, how can we even improve? How can we work on this as a base to then generate further resources for these young people? So it's an adaptation of a version for adult carers created by the World Health Organization. So the two aims are to support the mental health, the knowledge and the skills of these young people, but also to help service providers, and I know there's loads of you today in the webinar, help service providers to improve the support that they can offer, because I've heard many times, and I've had many discussions many times, where professionals will say to me, there just isn't anything out there, so anything that we can have that will support us and support the young people is really, really welcome. All the details on how we did the adaptation are in this QR code and in this paper. So there's we work with 6 young people that were amazing at helping us create it. We had meetings face-to-face, online, one-to-one, and we developed the iSupport for Young People that, as you can see, has 5 different modules with different lessons within the modules. Not all of them will be relevant to all children. So as we said, every child and every family will be different. So hopefully there's something there that applies to each family. So it has information about dementia and how it can affect people. So it gives a little bit of a background of what dementia is like and the symptoms. It also has caring tips and sort of advice of where you can go and get support and help, because it's very important to go to look for the help. So that's something that is reiterated across iSupport for Young People. So it has a lot of case scenarios, so with young people as the main protagonists. So you have Leah, that is 14, or David, or Fatima. All the examples were developed with the young people that helped us create it. As I said, it has many real life scenarios that young people shared with us. So it's all explained in examples, so that it's more relatable and easier to understand. And it also has activities, sort of interactive activities, to provide a sort of a framework for reflection for the young people. So they can think, for example, what activities they like to do. They can choose the activity and then think about, for example, the barriers that they're finding to do those things that they like doing. So the tool takes them through what they can do, maybe to ask for help to be able to do those things that are important to them. But I guess it's better if two of the young girls that helped us develop it, if they tell you what they think about it. So I'm going to play a little video of two of them, giving us a little bit of an overview of what they think about the final version. And here you go.
This is what two young people who helped us create iSupport for Young People had to say.
I'm really happy with the way that it's turned out, because I hope that it can be used as a support system for young carers, and to like help inform them for what could happen, help them learn about how to deal with certain things, and to possibly prepare them for what could happen, because without any sort of help, any sort of preparation, it can be really shocking and take someone by surprise. But if they are more prepared for the future, what could happen and how to deal with it, hopefully not only will they be able to handle it better, but they will also be able to possibly mentally prepare themselves a bit more for what could happen to the person that they're caring for, or just in general the future of being a young carer.
For somebody to have a book written by people going through the same thing as them, which will be read by people going through the same thing as them, helps them to think they're not alone, and I think that's really helpful. Also, ways to cope and how to ask for help is really, really important in the book. It can help you obviously cope. All the activities are aimed to help you. So I think it's really, really an interesting and amazing book that is done really, really well, and I would definitely recommend it.
This could help someone that's also a young carer to make them realise that that they're not alone and they can do it, and although it is difficult, hopefully this could make it easier for them.
Well, I hope that was sort of nice to hear Bessie and Paige telling us about it. All of these young people, Anna, Bessie, Elsie, Millie, Paige and Taliesin, they all helped us to create it, and they were absolutely amazing at telling us about their experiences and how those experiences could help populate iSupport for Young People. So what are we doing now that iSupport for Young People is created? I obviously am completely aware that it's a first stepping stone. So that's why we're working with Hannah, Dementia UK, to improve it, to use it, however it can be used, and to develop it further, to create tailored support services. We're also working internationally with Spain, with Brazil, and with Italy, and we've done translation, so it's been translated to Spanish, to Portuguese, and to Welsh, and is almost finished being translated to Italian. But obviously we're aware that just translating something doesn't mean that it's suitable for that population. So we're working with those countries to start generating awareness, to start discussing this group of young people and their families, because here there is a lack of awareness, but that lack of awareness is very much a problem throughout Europe, and I would say throughout the world. So that's what we're doing, trying to raise the voice of these young people and kind of join forces, myself and Hannah, Dementia UK, to keep looking at this. And just for information as well, there's a short CPD course about iSupport for young people, how to use it, how it might be useful in your case, and that can also be accessed in the QR code. And I will pass on to Hannah.
Okay, it's back to me. Okay, yeah, how are we working together to improve support? Yeah, to start talking about it is so important, and working together in many ways. So recently, you can probably chip in as well. So last week we met in Manchester. We had a workshop together with a number of people from different organisations. So you can see in the picture, so we've got Andy McGowan, the Young Carer Alliance, we've got Jules Knight, Young Onset Nurse for Dementia UK, also Will from Lorenzo House there, and other local and people with lived experience as well, and Susie from Dementia UK too. So it was really about coming together and actually talking about what does peer support look like for children living within young onset families, and really start the process of discussing it from different areas and different levels of experiences as well. So that was really great to come together, and networking as well. So Dementia UK, looking at being part of the Young Carer Alliance and how we can work together. So really that networking process was really a great experience to meet people in person as well, and not on screen, to talk about all equal keenness about young onset families, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then I'm going to hand that back to Patrick to talk about our funding application that's been submitted recently.
Yeah, so obviously we still don't know whether we got the funding, but we're going to assume we have. And in that workshop, we were all very optimistic that we would get the funding. And the workshop was a way to start exploring what the funding application is focusing on. So that funding application is looking at working with young people and families and professionals to co-design a peer support program that can be sustainable. So it has to be something that is not very, that can be delivered easily, and that can be easy to offer across the UK, because as we said, there's loads of postcode lottery with these young families. So we have to work on something that can be easily accessible for everybody, and it doesn't matter where you live. So we had loads of discussions, and I think we left there with very big brains, with loads of information, but you have to go through the confusing part to get to clarity. So hopefully if we do get the funding, we can then develop this peer support program that will be based in young people's and families' experiences. So we'll keep you posted on that one. Watch this space, and we'll definitely be looking for plenty of participants and voices to help us develop this if we get the funding.
Okay, so to sum up, I think we're making progress. There's awareness of young onset families. So we're increasing that awareness, which is so vital. But we understand there's still a lot of work to be done. It's that ongoing process. We can't do it alone. It's that collaboration with different organisations as well. But we're going in that right step, and we hope to continue. So Dementia UK and Bangor University will continue to work with families and young people to improve services and support going forward as well. So it feels like, even though this role is very new, it's the start of actually putting children and young people within young onset families in the spotlight, and that's really important. So we might come back soon with an update of how things are going. But so that's our presentation. So any questions, we'd be happy to answer, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah and Patricia, for that presentation. It's excellent to hear about the progress you're making and the support you're able to provide. Patricia, are you able to stop sharing now? That perfect.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got some questions in the Q&A box. So I'll just ask the questions and then you can decide who is best to answer them. And actually the first one I'm going to ask is about iSupport, so probably for you, Patricia, and I thought I'd start with that one as we've just covered it. So do you feel it's a resource which is deliverable without a person-facing component, or is it, in your experience, better to have the person-facing elements are necessary for uptake of it for young people?
I think very, very important, I think, to have some face-to-face or some option of a blended delivery. We've just finished a big randomized control trial on the adult version of iSupport, and one of the things that came up many times was adult carers telling us that although the information was useful, because it was purely online, they felt they hadn't had the benefit that they could have had. So definitely a professional maybe helping deliver it, or maybe somebody in a young care organization running through things so they can identify the bits that are relevant to that young person, and then discuss them, so there is a way to reflect once you've read through the tool. So yeah, I think blended way of delivering way better.
Okay, that sounds good. Just going back to the interview with Bethan, and there's been a question about how Bethan felt talking to her friends about her mum's dementia. I don't know if either of you are able to answer that, you know, whether she found that embarrassing, difficult, taboo. You know, it's obviously not a common experience amongst people her age to have a parent with dementia, and how she felt about that.
I don't know Bethan, but I'm sure both Hannah and I have heard that circumstances, that situation where young people are struggling to share their parents' illness with friends and family members, I think is something that we've heard. I'm sure you can relate to that as well, Hannah.
Yeah, I think children find it difficult adults find it hard to put into words what they're going through. With children, it's hard. And children are going through a lot of personal growth and development. They've got puberty, they've got pressures of growing up, exams. They don't want to often stand out. They want to blend in, isn't it? So often it's really hard to get their friends to understand and support. And sometimes we just say, just having that one friend that knows. They have to talk about it. Sometimes children don't want to talk about dementia all the time. They want to be with their friends and to switch off and have that time to being a child, because you only have one childhood. So yeah, it can be a difficult aspect of having a parent with young onset.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry to interrupt, but it's accentuated by the fact that sometimes just by looking at the person, you wouldn't think there's, so some young people will say that it's hard enough to know your parent has a diagnosis like this, but it's even harder to actually have to say to friends, I promise you I'm not lying, something is wrong with my mom or my dad. But it's, that makes it extra hard.
Yeah, definitely. And the fluctuations have good days and bad days, and often young onset isn't memory led, isn't it? It can be behaviour, language. So that can be difficult to actually know how the person living with dementia is feeling, and friends. And children sometimes can be embarrassed as well. Children can be embarrassed of their parents, isn't it? And you've got complexities of young onset as well as that extra layer.
That's a challenging time. So I have a question here. It says they've started to work with CAMHS and Children's Services and social care to start to develop and strengthen a collaborative approach to what has been historically separate disciplines, and they're finding it really difficult. Are the consultant roles at Dementia UK, this is a question for you, Hannah, helping to develop pathways and mechanisms to better collaborative working?
I think with the consultant adult nurses is that leadership, that advanced clinical practice on a national level. The adult nurses, consultant adult nurses are national levels, and that collaboration between the different teams within Dementia UK. My role, I have been invited to a local dementia strategy where they want to put young carers or families with young onset on their dementia strategy. So often, sometimes it's having that example that can be shared nationally as well. So the roles are to work nationally as well with the ICBs as well, to embed services.
I think that is the difficult bit, isn't it? It's the ensuring the services are joined up and work together. So,
yeah. And I think one of the things we discussed loads in the workshop last week was that sort of communication between services, and sometimes questions that are not being asked when a family is first given a diagnosis. So people that go and visit the family or give this diagnosis, not really asking who is in this family, who is going to be affected by the diagnosis, because sometimes they don't really know what they would answer if the response is, oh, there's 3 young kids. So adult services being more aware of children's services and the other way around, so the communication can improve. I think those pathways are definitely something that need improving.
I've got a question here about research, and somebody who says they are finalising a piece of research around the experiences of children and young people with a parent with dementia, and aiming for publication in the new year, and just any advice around how to disseminate that paper. They are presenting at a Dementia Congress next week, but certainly I would just say, please let the Dementia Network know. We can we have a section of our website for research for young onset where we can publish it. We can put it into our newsletter. But have you got any other advice, Patricia?
I think what I would say is make it as broad as possible. So think about all young carers charities and all young carers associations. So Andy McGowan, and if you want to email me, I can pass you all these emails. Andy McGowan runs something called is part of Carers Trust. It's called the Young Carers Alliance. And it's a network. I think there's around 200 organizations now that are part of that network that work with young carers. So although obviously we said the term young carer is not for everybody and it's not something that many of these kids relate to, but if strategically speaking, and making the young care definition as broad as we can, these charities really are trying to also develop help for these young people. So I think going at targeting young carers charities, and definitely Young Carers Alliance in the Carers Trust, they will include it in their newsletter. Really, they're very open to sharing any research or things that are relevant. So that would be one thing. I was going to be in Dementia Congress next week, and I was hoping to, I think I know who this person is, to meet them, but I have a family emergency, so I won't be attending. But if they want to email, I'm sure myself or Hannah can provide plenty of...
Because I will be at the Congress next week. I'm not presenting, but I will be there. So on the 26th, I will come to the presentation, and we're happy to share it with Admiral nurses through the Admiral Nurse Academy as well, to help academic paper to help Admiral nurses educate themselves as well across the UK.
Yeah. And also I think maybe so in the presentation I showed that sort of illustration that we did, and that about what young dementia carers need, and that type of illustration that is sort of fun looking, easy to understand. That's turned into an animation that is on YouTube, so that's free, available to anybody to see on YouTube. That's a good way to share outcomes from a study. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, lots of great advice there. Thank you very much. So we've had a comment here from somebody say that it's a really positive development. How will you be evaluating the service that you're delivering, Hannah, and the team? So a question for you.
Yeah, so at Dementia UK we have insight and evaluation team. So everything that I do, every presentation I do, every person I support, we collect data, and that is actually put into reports. So a 6-month report, a yearly report, and that is shared internally as well. So it's looking at actually demand. So this data that we collect actually projects the future and what actually support is needed, because it is a new area for Dementia UK and consultant admiral nursing. We're growing as a team, so we do have like frailty, young onset, Lewy body, football and dementia, sport and dementia, sorry. So it's about collecting the data and actually seeing the demand and developing the services to fit the demand as well. So we always collect the data because it's helping us to understand, it's helping us what interventions need, what's working, what's not working, how do we support children who are at school, is it weekend support, evening support? So it really helps us guide everything that we do. So data is very important in Dementia Care. We have a whole team that's there to produce the reports and reflect.
That's great. So a question now about the differences and similarities to supporting children versus adults. So they say, what is the biggest difference when supporting children as opposed to adults who are caring for somebody with dementia?
To answer that one, should I start? I think it's that a child it's their childhood, isn't it? The moment in their life, what's going on in their life, the maturity to understand the physically as well. Caring can be physically hands-on care, isn't it? And that emotional support that adults can provide as an adult carer, but when you're a child, it's very different. But it's often, sometimes people don't talk about the positive. Sometimes young people do get a positive, a sense of purpose, sense of maturity, a closeness to a person with dementia that they're caring for, maybe more the intergenerational, older generations, being a grandparent, and that confidence and closeness. So it's, yeah, so it is very different when you're a child, because the pressures of growing up, isn't it, as well? And the commissioning of services locally. Schools are great for counselling, young carer support. So it's about the children themselves to recognise the caring responsibilities that they're giving. So understanding generally what caring is, you don't have to be washing someone to be a carer. You can be offering that, making a sandwich. You can be just keeping an eye on someone while the other parent pops out. So it's about that awareness as well to support young dementia carers. What role do they play in providing care? And it's that difference. And hope with this work we can raise awareness, though there is that more tailored support, because every family is different. Older siblings, younger siblings, they become carers for their younger siblings as well. So it's that whole dynamic within the family that changes with young onset. When you haven't got the parent you've gone to had young onset. So it's just that, who do you go to, isn't it? If you're a single parent, cultural differences as well. So it's very different for everyone as well. Generally caring, isn't it? No one person is the same.
And also, I think one of the differences or the things that are challenging in this case is that because most of these young people are secondary care, so they're rarely going to be the primary care, then they feel that that really they don't need the help, that they're not really they don't see themselves as having that responsibility, or so they often think, oh, well, what I'm doing is the normal thing I would do, but I'm not, is nothing special. So with adult carers, that if they are the primary care, they are aware I have this care and responsibilities, but kids very rarely see that as a caring role. And as Hannah was saying, it's getting across the message that caring doesn't mean helping feed somebody or things more practical. It could literally be sitting watching television with a list of numbers on the side of people you need to contact if dad or mum do something that is worrying, or so it's opening up the definition of what a young carer is, so they feel that it relates to them.
So our next question, this person says, my children are 3 and 7 and we're based in Cornwall. What organisation should they contact to look for support for the children? They can see that iSupport is for 10 years plus, so their children are 3 and 7. So where do they go for support?
I think what I would say is that with iSupport, I mean, obviously with 10, it's obviously for older children that can read the content and relate to it. But maybe there are bits in there that if the parents, if the mom or the dad read it, they might then give them ideas of things to do with the young kids. But that's something that is obviously another massive gap with kids as young as 3 and 7. If there is a lack of resources for older kids, for that age of little ones, it's even more acute, and is where the family approach is vital, because if the whole family needs to be supported, and it needs to be a communication effort between everybody in the family. So we're trying everything we do with Hannah and looking at the peer support, and it's trying to see how, if you only support one part of that family, it's not going to work. So it's looking at a more broad sort of support, considering the family as a unit.
Yeah, and this sort of role is also supporting the parents to support the children. So it's looking at other families to educate them how to support the children. And when they're so young, 3 and 7, isn't it? It's so young, their understanding of the impact. So it's often the nursery, working nurseries, working at the school, so they know On our Dementia UK website, we have got resources for school to understand dementia. So often it's creating that support around that child where they are, to understand and dynamics. If a parent picks up and they've got dementia, isn't it? It's recognising, looking at strategies to keep that relationship and closeness together and involved in their life. Because 3 and 7, it's young, and it's about that support around them. So sometimes just knowing the other parent is there if they need to is really important. So this role is also about supporting other families members to support children within families as well.
Yeah, I think
our helpline, if you need any support, Dementia UK helpline for advice with dementia impacting the family.
And definitely as well, young carers associations, they might fill a gap that is needed to be filled at the moment, with being able to talk to other kids, play with other kids, and so it might be worth looking at young carers organizations nearby.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. That's the difficult part, isn't it? Sometimes is not knowing where to go in your area or what's in your area for children or for young onset in general, but particularly for children. How do you find that? It's very difficult. So that's good advice.
Yeah, but being broad, looking for, I think the first step is maybe thinking of these young kids as carers. And once maybe that you think, oh, well, yeah, they are. So then that opens up other doors of other type of support.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you mentioned about the resources for schools, because schools may not have had this before, may not have experienced children within schools, especially primary schools where children have a parent with young onset dementia. So I think we'll put the link in the chat.
Although one thing I would say, we've always had the feedback that primary schools are because they tend to be smaller. Sometimes if the school is happy to collaborate, and you maybe happen to have a staff member that has experience of, then they can be quite open at, for example, doing sessions for the whole class where they talk about dementia. And one of the families that we work with had this experience where the headmistress organized a whole sort of school approach to support the 2 young people that had a dad with dementia. So maybe worth also speaking to the school and seeing whether they want to do something like that, whether they're open to that.
Yeah, it just starts that conversation, doesn't it? Talking about the word dementia, isn't it? People don't stigma associated with it. But with Admiral Nursing, we do have services in Cornwall, so we always say, reach out to Dementia UK helpline and see what support's there as well.
Yeah. And just one more, I think we've got time for one more before we finish. This person says, surely it should be assumed that all children are carers by default and should be automatically offered support. And I think we probably agree that that should be the case. It's not always the case. And they said any child living in a household with a parent who has dementia will have all of those issues you've identified. And I think it's, about ensuring that they're automatically offered support and there's something in their area provided for them. And I think that's what Hannah's and Patricia continue to work for.
That gold standard, right, sort of pathway of support, isn't it? Of children with all conditions. We recognise it. Young carers with many different conditions, isn't it? But particular challenges of young onset, and automatically that family approach to a diagnosis as well is really key. So this role, we hope, we're going in that direction. That would be an ultimate goal, wouldn't it? That would be amazing. So just that going forward.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're nearly out of time, so I think it's time to finish up and just say thank you to Patricia and Hannah for your presentations today. We will be sending out everybody an email in the next in 48 hours with a link to the recording of the webinar and the slides, and lots of the other resources that we've spoken about today as well will be in that email. So look out for that when it comes out, and then the recording will be on our website and YouTube channel. Just to say, we're taking a break from the webinar programme for a couple of months, and we'll be back in February, where we'll be covering care homes and for people with young onset. I think that's the 12th of February, but that will be confirmed in the Young Dementia Network newsletters that are coming out soon. So thank you very much today, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.